I never thought I'd be standing in the middle of my grandson's wedding reception with my face stinging and 300 people staring at me in horror. But there I was, 72 years old, wearing my best navy dress with my son's handprint burning across my cheek. The crack of the slap echoed through the reception hall like a gunshot. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Every single person in that beautifully decorated room turned to look at us. "You selfish, ungrateful woman," David screamed. His face was purple with rage, veins bulging at his temples. Spit flew from his mouth as he shouted, "After everything we've done for you, after all the care we've given you." I tasted blood. My teeth had cut the inside of my lip. The pain was sharp and metallic, but I didn't move. I just stood there by the dessert table, my hand pressed to my burning cheek, looking at this man who used to be my baby boy. Tyler, my grandson, the groom, stood frozen on the dance floor in his tuxedo. His face was white with shock. Sophie, his bride, had her hand over her mouth, her white dress shimmering under the lights. Just 30 seconds earlier, everything had seemed normal. Well, as normal as things could be with David circling me like a shark all evening. He'd cornered me by the dessert table, his wife Melissa hovering behind him with that smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. He'd shoved papers at me, a whole stack of them, held together with a binder clip. A pen appeared in his other hand like a magician's trick. "Sign it, Mom," he'd said. His voice had been sticky sweet, but his eyes were hard, cold, like a stranger's eyes. "Tyler and Sophie need a house. You're all alone in that big place. This is your chance to prove you actually love your family." His voice had gotten louder with each word. People nearby had started turning to watch. Prove it right here, right now, in front of everyone who matters. The whole room had gone quiet. All those faces, watching, waiting to see what the grandmother would do. I'd looked down at the papers, property transfer documents. My house, the 4-bedroom colonial that Richard and I had bought in 1985 for $89,000, that was now worth $700,000. My home, my memories, my security. Then I'd looked at my son, really looked at him, at this 45-year-old man who'd spent the last year lying to me, manipulating me, trying to steal from me. I'd smiled, and I'd placed the papers back in his hands. "No," I'd said simply. That's when he'd hit me. The gasps came in waves. Someone screamed. I heard Tyler shouting, "Dad, what the hell?" But it all sounded far away, like I was underwater. Have you ever been hit by someone you love? It's not just the physical pain. It's the betrayal that hits harder than any hand ever could. Melissa grabbed David's arm, her fingernails digging into his expensive suit jacket. Her eyes were wild, darting around the room at all the witnesses to her husband's violence. But then something happened that no one, especially not David, expected. Sophie stood up from the head table. Her white dress rustled as she walked toward us, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor with purpose. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. "Stop," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos like a knife. "Everyone needs to stop right now." She walked right up to David, holding her phone in her hand. Her face was set in an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, cold fury. "Mrs. Thompson isn't signing anything," Sophie announced to the entire room, "because what David just tried to make her sign wasn't a gift, it was fraud." The room exploded with shocked murmurs. David's face went from purple to white in seconds. "Sophie, you don't know what you're talking about. I work at the county courthouse," Sophie continued, her voice steady and clear. "In property records, 3 weeks ago, a quitclaim deed came across my desk. A deed transferring Eleanor Thompson's house to David Thompson. It was rejected because the signature was forged." She held up her phone. "And that's not all," she said. "I have recordings, text messages, emails, everything." "Where are you watching from?" Have you ever seen someone's entire world collapse in front of 300 people? Because that's what I witnessed in my son's eyes at that moment. Tyler stood there, looking between his father and his new wife like his whole world had just shattered. Because it had. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. Because the slap at Tyler's wedding wasn't the beginning. It was the end of something that had been building for over a year. A nightmare I'd been too trusting, too hopeful to see clearly until it was almost too late. My name is Eleanor Margaret Thompson, and I'm 72 years old. 2 years ago, I lost my husband Richard to a sudden heart attack. He was 74, still working part-time at the construction company he'd built from nothing, still kissing me goodbye every morning like we were newlyweds after 48 years of marriage. When Richard died, I thought my world had ended. The grief was physical, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. But Richard had been meticulous about our finances. He'd made sure I'd be taken care of. The house was paid off, a 4-bedroom colonial we'd bought in 1985 for $89,000 that was now worth $700,000. I had his life insurance, my teacher's pension from 40 years in elementary education, and our savings. I was comfortable, secure, safe, or so I thought. For the first 6 months after Richard died, David was wonderful. My only son called me twice a week. He stopped by every Sunday for dinner, bringing flowers or dessert. We'd sit at the kitchen table where I'd served him breakfast before school for 18 years, and we'd talk, really talk, about his father, about memories, about life. It was comforting. David and I had never been as close as I'd hoped, especially after he married Melissa 20 years ago. She was, how do I put this politely, particular, controlling. But in my grief, I was grateful for the attention. David worked in medical equipment sales, or that's what he told everyone. He and Melissa lived in a nice house about 30 minutes away, drove expensive cars, took lavish vacations. They seemed successful. I never questioned it. Why would I? My grandson, Tyler, was the real light of my life. At 22, he was everything I'd hoped David would be, kind, genuine, hardworking. He'd just finished his business degree and landed a position at a marketing firm. When he told me he'd proposed to Sophie, his girlfriend of 3 years, I'd cried happy tears. Sophie was sweet, intelligent, grounded. She worked as a clerk at the county courthouse in property records, and she adored Tyler. They were planning a spring wedding. The first strange thing happened about 8 months after Richard's funeral. David showed up on a Wednesday evening, unusual because he only visited on Sundays. Melissa was with him, carrying a casserole dish covered in foil. "Mom, we need to talk about your finances," David had said, settling into Richard's old recliner like he owned it. The sight of him in that chair made something twist in my stomach. "What about them?" I'd asked carefully. "Well, Dad always handled the money, right? We're just worried about you managing everything alone." I'd bristled at that. "Your father and I handled it together, David, and I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." "Of course you are, Eleanor," Melissa had jumped in, her voice dripping with condescension. "But wouldn't it be easier if David was on your bank accounts, just in case something happened? You're not getting any younger." "You're not getting any younger." I was 71. I'd been teaching 5-year-olds to read for 4 decades. I was sharp as I'd ever been. "I appreciate the concern," I'd said firmly, "but I'm fine." David's jaw had tightened, but he'd smiled. That smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just think about it, Mom." After they left, I'd found the casserole still sitting on my counter. They'd forgotten to put it in the refrigerator. When I'd lifted the foil, I'd seen it was store-bought, still in its plastic container, just transferred to one of my old Pyrex dishes. Something about that small deception had bothered me more than it should have. The visits increased after that. David started showing up unannounced. He was in the neighborhood. He wanted to check on me. He needed to grab something from the garage. Each time, he'd steer the conversation toward my finances, my health, my future. "Have you thought about downsizing?" This house is too big for one person. What if you fell? What if something happened and no one found you for days? Have you updated your will since Dad died? Mom, are you sure you're taking your medications correctly? You seem confused lately. I wasn't confused. My blood pressure medication, my vitamin D, my calcium supplement. I took them every morning with breakfast, same as I'd done for years. But David's constant suggestions started making me doubt myself. Was I forgetting things? Was the house too big? Was I being stubborn? Then Melissa started her campaign. At my cousin Barbara's birthday party, I'd overheard Melissa talking to Richard's sister. We're so worried about Eleanor, she's getting forgetful. Last week she completely forgot we were coming for dinner. That was a lie. They'd shown up unannounced. At church, David told my longtime friend Betty that I'd been having trouble with my medications. Another lie. They were building a narrative. Eleanor's declining. Eleanor needs help. Eleanor can't manage on her own, except I could. I was healthy, active, volunteering at the library twice a week, managing my finances perfectly well. Have you ever had someone try to convince other people you're losing your mind? It's terrifying. Because even though you know it's not true, you start wondering if maybe everyone else sees something you don't. About a year after Richard died, Tyler brought Sophie to Sunday dinner. She was animated, talking about her job at the courthouse, how fascinating it was to see all the real estate transactions and legal documents that came through. It's actually how I learned you owned your house free and clear, Mrs. Thompson, Sophie had said, smiling at me. I was processing some paperwork and saw the property records. It's so rare these days for people your age to have no mortgage. You and Mr. Thompson did an amazing job. David had gone very still across the table. Melissa had quickly changed the subject, asking Tyler about work with an almost frantic brightness. The next morning, I'd found something disturbing in my mailbox. A real estate appraisal for my house, from a company I'd never contacted. According to the paperwork, someone had requested a market analysis for a potential sale. My hands had shaken as I'd dialed the number on the letterhead. "Oh yes, Mrs. Thompson," a cheerful receptionist had chirped. "Your son David requested the appraisal last week. He said you were thinking of selling and wanted to know what the house was worth." I'd hung up without responding. I hadn't told David I was thinking of selling, because I wasn't. When I'd confronted him that Sunday, he'd laughed it off. "Mom, I was just getting information. I wanted to know what the house was worth so we could plan. You know, for your future, for when you might need assisted living or something." "I don't need assisted living." "God, Mom, why are you being so paranoid?" He'd actually rolled his eyes at me. "I'm trying to help you. This is what adult children do for their aging parents. We look out for them." Aging parents. The phrase had felt like a slap. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I'd felt something shift inside me. Not confusion, not doubt, fear, not of being alone or getting older, but fear of my own son. Over the next 3 months, the pressure became relentless. David brought me legal papers, power of attorney documents, financial authorization forms. "Just in case something happens to you," he'd say, pushing them across the kitchen table. Just to make things easier. I'd refused to sign anything. His frustration had started showing. The fake sweetness in his voice developed an edge. The concerned expressions became harder, more calculating. Then came the morning that changed everything. I'd gone out for my usual walk, 2 miles through the neighborhood, same route I'd taken for 20 years. When I'd returned, David's car was in my driveway. He had a key. I'd given it to him years ago for emergencies. I'd found him in Richard's old office, going through the filing cabinet. Papers were spread across the desk. My private papers, financial statements, insurance documents, the deed to the house. "What are you doing?" I'd asked from the doorway. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. He'd jumped. Actually jumped like a thief caught in the act. "Mom, you scared me. I was just looking for Dad's old insurance papers. For the lawyer, there are some things we still need to finalize with the estate. What lawyer? Richard's estate was finalized 9 months ago. Right, but there are some additional items. He'd started shoving papers back into the cabinet. I'll come back another time when you're here. I am here, David. You know what I mean. His voice had an edge now, sharp, almost angry. Get out, I'd said quietly. Mom, get out of my house now and give me that key. We'd stood there staring at each other. For a moment, I'd seen something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not love, not even anger, just cold calculation, like he was running numbers in his head, assessing, planning. He'd dropped the key on the desk and left without another word. I'd stood in that office, Richard's office, the room where my husband had paid our bills and planned our future and made sure I'd always be secure. And I'd known. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't a concerned son. This was something else, something dangerous. That afternoon, I'd called James Chen, Richard's business attorney for 25 years. James, I need to see you as soon as possible, and I need you to tell me if I'm being paranoid or if I should be worried. Tell me everything, Eleanor, he'd said. And I had. Every strange visit, every odd comment, every manipulation. When I'd finished, there was a long silence on the phone. Eleanor, James had finally said, his voice serious, you're not paranoid. Everything you've described raises significant red flags. I want you to come to my office tomorrow, and I want you to request copies of any documents filed with the county that have your name on them. Property records, deeds, liens, everything. You think he's already tried something? I think we need to find out. I'd hung up the phone and looked around my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd made David's breakfast before school, where I'd packed his lunches, where I'd celebrated his birthdays and comforted him through heartbreaks and helped him with homework at that same table where he'd tried to get me to sign away my rights. My son was trying to steal from me, and I was going to find out exactly how far he was willing to go. The next morning, I drove downtown to the county courthouse. It was an imposing brick building with marble floors that echoed with every footstep. I felt small walking through those heavy doors, intimidated by the official atmosphere. But I squared my shoulders and found the property records office on the second floor. The woman behind the counter wore glasses on a beaded chain and had kind eyes. Her name tag read, Linda. I'd like copies of all documents filed against my property, I'd said, sliding my driver's license and the property address across the counter. Linda had typed into her computer, her fingers clicking across the keyboard. Then her expression changed. Her eyebrows drew together. That's odd, she'd said. My heart had started pounding. What's odd? There's a flagged document here. It was submitted 3 weeks ago, but rejected for processing. 3 weeks ago. Right after David had found out from Sophie that I owned the house free and clear. What kind of document? I'd asked, though part of me already knew. A quitclaim deed, transferring property from Eleanor M. Thompson to David R. Thompson. Linda had looked up at me. It was rejected because the signature didn't match the signature on file from your original deed, and the notarization looked suspicious. We sent a letter to your address asking you to come in and verify. I'd never received any letter. David had a key. David got the mail sometimes when he visited. Can I see it? Linda had printed it out and slid it across the counter. There it was, my name, my address, my property, and at the bottom, a signature that was supposed to be mine. Except it wasn't. It was close. Someone had practiced. The E in Eleanor had the same general shape, but the loop was wrong. The T in Thompson was too tall. The overall slant was different. Anyone who didn't know my signature might think it was real. But I'd been signing Eleanor M. Thompson for 72 years. This wasn't my signature. My son had forged my name. Had tried to steal my house. Had committed fraud. The room tilted. I'd gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. Ma'am? Linda had touched my arm gently. "Are you okay? Do you need to sit down?" "This isn't my signature," I'd said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never signed this document. I've never even seen it before." Linda's expression had shifted from curious to deeply concerned. "Mrs. Thompson, you need to file a fraud report. This is attempted property theft. This is serious." "I know." My voice had sounded strange to my own ears, hollow. "I need copies of everything. And I need to know, is there any way to flag my property so nothing can be filed without me appearing in person?" "Absolutely. Let me get my supervisor." 20 minutes later, I'd walked out of that courthouse with a manila folder full of documents and a property alert in place. No transfers, no liens, no documents of any kind could be filed against my property without me physically appearing to verify my identity and signature. I'd sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, just breathing, just trying to process what I'd learned. My son had tried to steal my house, my baby boy, the child I'd carried for 9 months, the toddler I'd rocked to sleep, the little boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd helped with college applications, the man I'd supported through his wedding, his career, his life. He'd forged my signature and tried to steal my home. I'd called James Chen from the parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. "Eleanor, what did you find?" "You were right," I'd said. "He tried to forge a quitclaim deed 3 weeks ago. The courthouse rejected it, but I never got the notification letter." There'd been a long pause. "Come to my office, now. Bring everything." James's office was in a renovated Victorian house downtown, all wood paneling and leather chairs. He'd spread the documents across his conference table and studied them with increasing grimness. "Eleanor, this is serious. This is fraud, attempted theft, forgery. We need to consider filing a police report." "Not yet," I'd said. "I need to know how deep this goes, if there's more." "There's usually more," James had said quietly, looking up at me over his reading glasses. "In my experience, this kind of thing doesn't happen in isolation. If he was bold enough to try this, he's probably tried other things." "Like what?" "Bank accounts, credit cards, insurance policies, medical records. We need to check everything." Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I checked every account, every policy, every piece of my financial existence. What I found made me physically sick. David had attempted to add himself as an authorized user on my checking account 4 months earlier. The bank had denied it because they'd called to verify with me, and I'd said no. I'd thought it was a scam call at the time. I'd had no idea it was actually David. He'd tried to open a credit card in my name. It had been denied because of a fraud alert on my credit that I didn't even remember setting up years ago. Thank God for that fraud alert. The most disturbing discovery came when my doctor's office called. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Nancy from Dr. Morrison's office. I'm calling because we've received multiple requests for your medical records from your son David. He's asking about cognitive assessments and whether you've been evaluated for dementia or memory issues. Did you authorize these requests?" The floor had seemed to drop out from under me. "No, I absolutely did not." "I didn't think so. You seem sharp as a tack every time you're here. I wanted to verify before releasing anything. I'll note in your file that no information should be given to anyone without your explicit written consent." "Thank you, Nancy." I'd sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. "Can I ask, how many times has he called?" 4 times in the last 3 months. He's been quite persistent." 4 times. David had called my doctor 4 times trying to get evidence that I was mentally incompetent. I'd started keeping a notebook. Every incident, every attempt, every lie, dates, times, details. The picture that emerged was chilling. Then I'd called my insurance agent, Tom, who'd been handling my policies for 15 years. "Eleanor, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "Tom, has anyone contacted you about my homeowner's insurance recently?" There'd been a pause. "Actually, yes. Your daughter-in-law Melissa called about 2 months ago. She wanted to make changes to the policy and add David as a co-insured party. I told her any changes would require your signature, and she got quite upset. Said you were becoming forgetful and she was trying to help manage your affairs. But Eleanor, you've never seemed forgetful to me. I'm not forgetful, Tom, and I didn't authorize any changes. I figured as much. That's why I didn't do anything without talking to you first. After I'd hung up, I'd sat at my kitchen table surrounded by notes and printouts and the growing evidence of betrayal. And I'd cried. Not for myself. For the son I'd thought I'd raised. For the values I'd thought I'd instilled. Honesty, integrity, kindness. Where had I gone wrong? What had I missed? But then I dried my eyes and made a decision. I hadn't done anything wrong. David had made his choices, and I needed to know why. I'd started researching. I'd Googled David's name with terms like lawsuit, debt, judgment, bankruptcy. What I'd found had been shocking. 3 civil judgments against David R. Thompson for unpaid debts totaling $87,000. A lien against his house from the IRS for unpaid taxes, $34,000. 2 credit card companies had sued him in the last year. My successful, well-dressed son, who drove a BMW and took vacations to Europe, was drowning in debt. I'd called Betty, my friend from church, and asked her carefully if she'd noticed anything odd about David lately. She'd hesitated, then leaned in close over our coffee. Eleanor, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but last month at the church fundraiser I overheard David on his phone outside. He was arguing with someone about money. He said something like, "I told you I'd have it by the end of the month, just give me more time." He sounded desperate, scared even. Gambling debts. That's what the tone had sounded like to Betty, who'd worked at a casino in her 20s. I'd thanked her and gone home to search more. Online gambling sites, casino loyalty programs. It took some digging, but I'd found references to David on gambling forums, asking for system tips and sure bets. My son had a gambling problem, and he'd decided my $700,000 house was his solution. But that wasn't even the worst discovery. 2 weeks before Tyler's wedding, Sophie had called me. Her voice had been shaking. "Mrs. Thompson, can I come see you? Alone? Without telling Tyler or anyone else?" "Of course, dear. What's wrong?" "Everything," she'd said. "Everything is wrong." She'd arrived an hour later, her eyes red from crying, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Mrs. Thompson, I need to show you something, and I'm so sorry." We'd sat in my living room, and Sophie had opened her phone to show me screenshots. Dozens of them. "I work in property records at the courthouse," she'd begun, her voice tight. "When that forged quitclaim deed came across my desk, I processed the rejection like normal. But then I saw the name, David Thompson, Tyler's father, your son." She'd taken a shaky breath. I knew it was wrong to look further, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I started searching public records, court filings, property transactions, just trying to understand. "What did you find?" "Mrs. Thompson, David has been planning this for over a year." She'd scrolled through the screenshots, explaining each one with increasing horror in her voice. 6 months ago, David had consulted with a real estate attorney, not James Chen, a different one, about transferring property from an elderly parent and what the legal requirements were. 4 months ago, he'd researched adult guardianship laws, specifically how to have someone declared legally incompetent. 3 months ago, Melissa had contacted 2 different assisted living facilities, inquiring about memory care units and pricing, saying her mother-in-law would be moving in soon. "But that's not even the worst part," Sophie had said, her voice breaking. "Mrs. Thompson, I found emails between David and Melissa." "How did you get their emails?" "Melissa uses the computer in David's home office. Sometimes Tyler and I stay at their house to watch their dog when they travel." Last month, Melissa left her email open on the screen. "I saw your name in a message, and I read them. I know I shouldn't have, but I read them all. She'd shown me the emails. I'd read them with hands that trembled so badly I could barely hold the phone. From David to Melissa, dated 4 months earlier. She's being impossible about the house. We need to accelerate the timeline. If we can get her declared incompetent, I can petition for guardianship and control all her assets. I found a doctor who will do the evaluation for $5,000. Just need to get her to the appointment. From Melissa to David. I've been telling everyone she's getting forgetful and confused, laying the groundwork. When the time comes, we'll have plenty of people who will testify she's not capable of making her own decisions. From David to Melissa. The house appraises at $720K. If we can get it transferred before she figures out what's happening, we can sell it immediately. That pays off everything. The credit cards, the IRS, the gambling debts, all of it. We'll be clear. I'd sat there holding Sophie's phone, reading about my own son plotting to destroy me, and I'd felt something inside me break and then immediately harden into something else, something cold, something determined, something that wouldn't be a victim. Sophie, I'd said carefully, looking up at this brave young woman who'd risked so much to tell me the truth. If I asked you to do something difficult, something that might cause problems in your relationship with Tyler at first, would you do it? She'd looked at me with tears streaming down her face. What do you need? I need you to gather every piece of evidence you can. Everything. Photos of documents, screenshots of emails, recordings if possible. And I need you to be willing to testify to what you've found, if it comes to that. Tyler deserves to know the truth, Sophie had said firmly. You deserve justice. I'll do it. What would you do if you discovered your own child was planning to have you declared incompetent and steal everything you owned? Would you fight back? Or would you let family loyalty silence you? Over the next 10 days leading up to the wedding, Sophie had been brilliant, careful, methodical. She'd photographed every document in David's home office while dog-sitting. Bank statements showing the gambling losses, credit card bills, collection notices, legal correspondence. The printed emails discussing the scheme, hundreds of pages of evidence. She'd used her phone to record Melissa at a family dinner, talking about poor Eleanor's declining memory to Tyler's aunt. She'd saved every text message where David had asked her not to mention certain things to Tyler. Every suspicious conversation, and she'd given it all to me. I'd sat at my kitchen table with folders full of evidence, and I'd called James Chen one more time. James, I need to see you, today if possible. I have everything. When I'd spread it all across his conference table, the forged deed, the emails, the bank statements, the medical record requests, the photographs, the recordings, James had whistled low and long. Eleanor, this is a prosecutor's dream. Fraud, attempted theft, elder abuse, financial exploitation. If you wanted to press charges, David would be looking at serious prison time. I don't want him in prison, I'd said, though part of me wasn't sure that was entirely true anymore. He's still my son, but I want him stopped. And I want Tyler to know the truth before he spends his life believing lies about me and his father. James had leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. The wedding is in 3 days. Yes. Big event? Lots of witnesses? About 300 guests. James had smiled then. Not a warm smile. A strategic smile. What if we exposed him there, publicly, with all those witnesses, made it impossible for him to lie or manipulate his way out of it? I'd stared at James. At Tyler's wedding? I know it sounds cruel, but Eleanor, think about it. David has been using family events, family pressure, family loyalty as weapons against you for over a year. What if we use that same tactic against him? What if we let him make his final play, because you know he will, and then we destroy him in front of everyone? Sophie, who'd come to the meeting with me, had sat forward suddenly. I'll do it. I'll be the one to expose him. It's my wedding too. And I won't let him hurt Mrs. Thompson anymore. We'd spent the next 2 days planning. James had prepared legal packets, Copies of every document, every piece of evidence, organized and indexed. He'd contacted the police to give them advance notice that a fraud case would be coming. Sophie had made backup copies of everything on 3 different thumb drives, and I'd practiced what I would say, how I would react, how I would stay strong when my son tried one last time to steal from me. "He'll try something at the wedding," James had said with certainty. "He's desperate. The walls are closing in. This is his last chance to pressure you in front of the family, to make you look like the bad guy if you refuse." "So we let him try," I'd said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "And then we end him." I didn't know it then, but David was going to do something even worse than we'd imagined. He was going to hit me, and that was going to be the final nail in his coffin. The day after we finalized our plan in James's office, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I changed every single lock in my house. The locksmith, a young man named Marcus, had looked at me curiously when I'd insisted on changing not just the front door, but the back door, the garage door, and even the door that led from the garage into the house. "Having security issues, ma'am?" he'd asked. "You could say that," I'd replied. "And Marcus, if anyone calls claiming to be my son and says they need a key, you don't have my permission to give them one. Understood?" He'd nodded slowly. Understood. When David had shown up that Sunday for his usual visit, I'd stopped canceling them because I needed him to think everything was normal. He'd tried his old key. I'd watched through the window as he'd stood on the porch, confusion crossing his face as the key wouldn't turn. I'd opened the door with a smile. "Oh, David, I had the locks changed. Security, you know. You hear so many stories about break-ins." His face had gone carefully blank. "You changed the locks?" "Just being cautious. At my age, you can't be too careful." I'd stepped aside to let him in. "Coffee?" I'd seen the flash of anger in his eyes before he'd hidden it. "Sure, coffee would be great, Mom." Over coffee, he'd been more aggressive than usual, more pushy. "Mom, we need to talk seriously about your future. Melissa and I have been looking at some really nice retirement communities, places where you'd have people around, activities, care if you need it." "I don't need care, David. I'm perfectly healthy. For now. But what about in 5 years? 10? You need to plan ahead." "I have planned ahead. Your father made sure of that." His jaw had tightened. "Dad's gone, Mom, and his plans might not be enough anymore. The world changes, expenses go up, medical costs are covered by my insurance. David, I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. I'm not moving into a retirement community, and I'm not signing over my house." The words had hung in the air between us. I'd said it out loud, the thing we'd been dancing around for months. His expression had hardened. "Who said anything about signing over your house?" "You did. 2 weeks ago, and 3 weeks before that, and multiple times before that. I never said—" He'd stopped himself, recalibrated. "Mom, are you feeling okay? You seem confused about our conversations." There it was, the gaslighting, the attempt to make me doubt my own memory. "I'm not confused, David. I remember every conversation perfectly." He'd stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I think maybe we should make an appointment with Dr. Morrison, just to check in, make sure everything's okay with your memory." "My memory is fine." "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Let me help you." I said no. We'd stared at each other across my kitchen table, and I'd seen something shift in his eyes. A hardness, a calculation. He knew he was losing control of the situation. "Fine," he'd said coldly, "but don't come crying to me when you're all alone in this big house and something happens. Don't expect me to drop everything to save you." "I won't," I'd said quietly. "I learned a long time ago that I can only count on myself." He'd left without another word, without a goodbye, without looking back. That's when I'd known for certain. My son didn't love me. Maybe he never had. I was an asset to him, a means to an end. And now that the asset was refusing to cooperate, I was disposable. But what David didn't know was that I'd been gathering my own ammunition. The day after that confrontation, James had filed several legal documents on my behalf. First, an updated will that specifically disinherited David and Melissa while leaving everything to Tyler in a protected trust. Second, a living will and healthcare directive that named Tyler, not David, as my healthcare proxy. Third, a power of attorney designation that, again, named Tyler and explicitly excluded David. We'd also set up what James called a documentation trail. Every time David or Melissa contacted me, I documented it. Date, time, what was said, any witnesses. I'd started recording phone conversations. California is a two-party consent state, but I'd done my research and found a legal workaround by informing them at the start of calls that I was recording for my records. Most of the time, they were so focused on their agenda that they barely registered the warning. The recordings were damning. David pressuring me to sign financial documents. Melissa making comments about my declining memory while I responded clearly and coherently. David losing his temper and saying things like, "You're being selfish and stupid, Mom. This house is worth $700,000 and you're just sitting in it like a dragon hoarding gold." I'd kept calm during these calls, kept my voice steady, let them dig their own graves with their words. 3 weeks before the wedding, David had tried a new tactic. He'd shown up with a man he introduced as Dr. Gerald Hayes, a geriatric specialist. "Mom, Dr. Hayes has agreed to do a free cognitive assessment for you, just to establish a baseline. It's something everyone your age should do." Dr. Hayes had been smooth, professional, carrying a briefcase full of paperwork. But I'd done my research. Dr. Gerald Hayes had a reputation for providing questionable medical evaluations for a price. He'd been sued twice for fraudulent assessments. "I appreciate the offer," I'd said politely, "but I already have a doctor I trust. Dr. Morrison has been my physician for 20 years. "But Dr. Morrison isn't a specialist in geriatric cognitive issues," David had started. "Dr. Morrison is perfectly qualified to refer me to a specialist if he believes I need one, which he doesn't, because I don't." I'd looked directly at Dr. Hayes. "And I know who you are, Dr. Hayes. I know about the lawsuits. I know about your reputation for providing convenient diagnoses for families looking to take control of elderly relatives' assets. So I'm going to ask you both to leave now." Dr. Hayes's face had gone pale. David's had gone red. "Mom, you're being paranoid. Get out, both of you, now." After they'd left, I'd called James immediately. He'd filed a complaint with the state medical board about Dr. Hayes's attempted involvement in what was clearly an exploitation scheme. But David hadn't given up. He'd just gotten more desperate. 2 weeks before the wedding, Melissa had started a whisper campaign among our extended family. I'd heard about it from my sister, Helen, who'd called me concerned. "Eleanor, I don't know how to say this, but Melissa has been calling family members. She says you're having serious memory problems, that you've been forgetting to eat, forgetting to take your medications. She says David is very worried and trying to get you help, but you're being resistant." "Helen, I'm not having any memory problems. This is part of their scheme to steal my house." There'd been a long pause. "Your house?" "David tried to forge my signature on a quitclaim deed. The county rejected it. I have proof. I have everything documented." "Oh, Eleanor." Helen's voice had been filled with horror and sympathy. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to stop them. At Tyler's wedding. In front of everyone." "At the wedding?" "Eleanor, that's necessary. Tyler deserves to know what his parents really are. And I deserve justice." Helen had been quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you need from me?" "Be there, be a witness, and be ready to support Tyler when his world falls apart." In the final week before the wedding, things had escalated to a fever pitch. David had called me every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, each call more aggressive than the last. "Mom, Tyler needs a house. Are you really going to let your grandson start his marriage without a home? Tyler has an apartment, David. He and Sophie are doing fine. They're barely scraping by. You could help them. I could, but I'm not giving my house away. It's not giving it away if it's staying in the family. It is when you're the one who'll actually control it. I know about your debts, David, all of them. There'd been dead silence on the line. Then his voice, low and dangerous. What did you say? I know about the gambling debts, the IRS lien, the lawsuits, the credit card judgments. $87,000 in debt, David. You're drowning and you decided I was your life raft. You've been spying on me? His voice had been shaking with rage. I've been protecting myself from you. He'd hung up on me. But an hour later, he'd called back, and his tone had completely changed. Soft, pleading, the voice of the little boy I'd raised. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're right. I'm in trouble. I've made mistakes, bad mistakes. I need help. Please, I'm your son. I'm begging you. Please help me. For just a moment, my heart had clenched. That voice, that plea. But then I'd remembered the forged signature, the emails about having me declared incompetent, the systematic campaign to destroy me. David, I'll help you, but not by giving you my house. I'll pay for gambling addiction counseling. I'll help you negotiate with your creditors. I'll support you in getting your life back together, but I won't enable you by bailing you out with my home. That's not good enough. The pleading voice had vanished instantly, replaced by rage. I need that house. I need it now. You're a selfish old woman who's going to die alone in that house anyway. Why can't you just... I'd hung up on him. That night, Melissa had shown up at my door. Alone. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged like she'd been crying. Eleanor, please, we're desperate. David's creditors are threatening legal action. We could lose our house, our cars, everything. You have so much. Can't you spare just a little to help your family? Did David send you here to appeal to my emotions? She'd blinked, surprised by the directness. No, I came because I'm scared. I have children to think about. Tyler needs his father. Can't you? Tyler is 24 years old, Melissa. He doesn't need his father. And if David loses everything, it's because of choices he made, not my responsibility to fix. Her expression had transformed in an instant. The tears had dried up. The pleading tone had vanished. Cold calculation had taken its place. You'll regret this, she'd said quietly. We'll make sure everyone knows how selfish you are, how you abandoned your family when they needed you most. Tyler will hate you. Everyone will hate you. Let them, I'd said. I'd rather be hated than robbed. She'd left, and I'd locked the door behind her, my hands shaking. Can you imagine having your own family threaten you? Try to manipulate you? Turn you into the villain for refusing to let them steal from you? How would you handle that? The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I'd lain in bed staring at the ceiling, running through the plan over and over in my mind. Sophie would be watching David. The moment he approached me with papers, because James was certain he would try one last time, she would be ready to expose him. James would be waiting outside with police, ready to file charges the moment we had David on record attempting fraud in front of witnesses. Tyler knew nothing. That had been the hardest part, keeping the truth from my grandson, letting him enjoy his wedding preparations without the burden of knowing what his parents really were. But it was necessary. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes. Otherwise, David would convince him I was lying. My phone had buzzed with a text from Sophie at midnight. I'm scared. What if this destroys everything? I'd texted back, it will destroy their lies. That's what matters. Trust me. Trust the truth. Her response, I trust you, Mrs. Thompson. Tomorrow, we end this. Tomorrow, we end this. The wedding day had dawned clear and beautiful, perfect weather for a celebration or for a reckoning. I'd put on my navy dress, the one Richard always said brought out my eyes. I'd done my hair and makeup carefully. I wanted to look strong, capable, unshakable, because I knew what was coming. David was going to make his final play, and when he did, I was going to destroy him. What I didn't know, what none of us could have predicted, was that David was going to lose control completely, that he was going to assault me in front of 300 people, that he was going to hand me a gift even better than anything we'd planned. He was going to prove, beyond any doubt, exactly what kind of man he was, and by the time the night was over, everyone would know the truth. So there I was, standing in the middle of my grandson's wedding reception with my cheek burning and blood in my mouth, while 300 people stared in shocked silence. But Sophie wasn't done. She stood there in her white wedding dress, holding her phone like a weapon, and she looked at David with an expression that could have frozen fire. "Mrs. Thompson isn't signing anything," she repeated, her voice carrying across the silent room. Because what David just tried to make her sign wasn't a gift. It was fraud. Tyler had started moving toward us, his face twisted in confusion and horror. "Dad, what is she talking about?" David held up his hands, trying to laugh it off, but his voice was shaking. "Tyler, this is crazy. Your wife is having some kind of breakdown. She doesn't know what she's saying." "I work at the county courthouse in property records," Sophie said, cutting him off. 3 weeks ago, a quitclaim deed came across my desk, a forged deed transferring your grandmother's house to your father. It was rejected because the signature didn't match, because David forged it." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, people pulling out their phones. "That's a lie!" Melissa shrieked, grabbing David's arm. "She's lying! She's trying to ruin us!" "I have copies," Sophie said calmly. She held up her phone. "I have the forged deed. I have emails between David and Melissa planning to have Eleanor declared incompetent so they could take control of her assets. I have bank statements showing David's gambling debts, over $100,000. I have recordings of Melissa telling people Eleanor was losing her memory, which is completely false." Tyler stood frozen between his father and his new wife, his face cycling through emotions, confusion, disbelief, horror. "Tyler," David started, his voice desperate now, all pretense of control gone. "Son, listen to me. This is all a misunderstanding. Sophie found some documents she didn't understand." "I understand perfectly," Sophie said. Her voice was steady, but I could see tears forming in her eyes. "I understand that you tried to steal from your own mother. I understand that you've been gaslighting her for over a year. I understand that you were willing to have her declared mentally incompetent, a woman who is sharper and stronger than most people half her age, just so you could pay off your gambling debts." "Gambling debts?" Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. He turned to look at his father. "Dad, what is she talking about?" David's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. That's when James Chen walked through the main doors, and my heart soared with relief and gratitude. James entered with 2 uniformed police officers flanking him. Officer Rodriguez, one of the officers from the wedding, and her partner, Officer Martinez. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Mrs. Eleanor Thompson?" Officer Rodriguez said, approaching me with genuine concern in her eyes. "Are you all right, ma'am?" I touched my cheek where David had struck me. It still burned. "I am now, officer." "Ma'am, we witnessed the assault from the doorway. We need to ask, do you want to press charges?" The room went dead silent. Every eye turned to me. I looked at David, really looked at him. At this man who'd hit his own mother in front of 300 people, who'd tried to steal my home, who'd planned to have me declared incompetent and locked away. "Yes," I said clearly. "I want to press charges for the assault and for attempted fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation." David backed up a step, his hands raised. "Wait. Everyone just calm down. Mom, you don't mean that. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "I've never thought more clearly in my life," I said. My voice didn't shake. I felt strangely calm, powerful. "Officers, I'd like to file a formal complaint." "Mrs. Thompson, we're going to need you to come to the station to give a statement," Officer Martinez said. "But first, Mr. Thompson, we need you to come with us to answer some questions." "Questions?" David's voice cracked. "You can't just— This is my son's wedding. You can't arrest me at my son's wedding." "We're not arresting you," Officer Rodriguez said. "Yet, but we do need you to come with us." James stepped forward then, opening his briefcase. "Officers, I'm Eleanor Thompson's attorney, James Chen. I have a complete file of evidence documenting Mr. David Thompson's attempts to defraud Mrs. Thompson. Forged documents, email correspondence, witness statements, and financial records. The district attorney's office is expecting us Monday morning." He pulled out a thick folder and handed it to Officer Rodriguez. She flipped through it, her expression growing increasingly grim. "This is extensive," she said quietly. "It's systematic elder abuse," James said. "David Thompson has spent over a year trying to steal his mother's home and assets. He forged legal documents. He attempted to have her declared mentally incompetent, despite her being perfectly healthy. He launched a campaign to isolate her from family and friends. And tonight, in front of 300 witnesses, he physically assaulted her when she refused to sign over her property." Melissa started crying, loud, dramatic sobs. "This is insane! We were trying to help her. She's confused. She's been having memory problems, and we were just trying to protect her." "I don't have memory problems," I said clearly, addressing the crowd. "I've never had memory problems. That's a lie David and Melissa have been spreading to justify taking control of my assets. I'm 72 years old, and I'm perfectly capable of managing my own life and my own property." I turned to look at all those faces, family, friends, people I'd known for decades. For over a year, my son has been trying to steal my house. The house his father and I bought in 1985. The house we worked our entire lives to pay off. David forged my signature on a quitclaim deed, trying to transfer it to himself. When that failed, he tried to have me declared incompetent so he could petition for guardianship. He's in debt, serious debt from gambling, and he decided my $700,000 home was his solution. The whispers grew louder. People were pulling out their phones, recording. Tyler's face had gone completely white. "Grandma, is this true?" "Every word," I said gently. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way, sweetheart. But you deserve to know the truth." "Tyler, don't listen to her." David grabbed his son's arm. "She's senile. She's making up crazy stories." Tyler yanked his arm away. "Don't touch me." His voice was cold. "Dad, did you forge Grandma's signature?" It wasn't— Tyler, you don't understand. Did you forge her signature?" David's face crumbled. "I needed help. I needed money. Your grandmother has so much and she wouldn't help me." "Because it's her money," Tyler shouted. "It's her house. You don't get to steal from your own mother just because you gambled away everything you had." Sophie moved to Tyler's side, putting her hand in his. United, together. Melissa tried one last desperate play. She turned to the crowd, her voice shaking. "Please, someone help us. Eleanor is sick. She doesn't understand what she's doing. She's tearing this family apart." "The only people tearing this family apart are you and your husband," I said. "You tried to steal from me. You tried to have me locked away. You spread lies about my mental health. And tonight, David committed assault in front of 300 witnesses. You did this, not me." Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, we need you to come with us now." "This is harassment," Melissa shrieked. "We haven't done anything wrong." "Ma'am, we have video evidence of Mr. Thompson assaulting his mother," Officer Martinez said, "and according to this documentation, there's probable cause for multiple felony charges. You can come voluntarily, or we can arrest you right now. Your choice." David looked around wildly, like he was looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. 300 witnesses, video recordings on dozens of phones, police, his lawyer with folders full of evidence. He was trapped, and he knew it. "Mom, please," he said, his voice breaking. "Please, I'm your son. You can't do this to me." I looked at him, at this man who'd shared my DNA, who I'd loved unconditionally for 45 years. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly, "when you chose money over integrity, when you chose greed over family, when you chose to see me as an obstacle instead of a person. I'm sorry." "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." The officers escorted David and Melissa toward the door. As they passed me, David stopped. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You'll end up alone and miserable, and you'll regret it." "I'd rather be alone than stolen from," I said. "Now get out of my grandson's wedding." They left. The doors closed behind them, and the room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Tyler walked over to me, my beautiful grandson with tears streaming down his face. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I swear I didn't know." "I know, sweetheart," I said, pulling him into a hug. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." Sophie joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry we had to do it this way, at the wedding, but—" "You did exactly the right thing," I said firmly. "You were brave. You were honest. You did what was right, even though it was hard. I'm proud of you." The room slowly started coming back to life. People approached, offering support, asking if I was okay, expressing shock and outrage at what David had done. My sister Helen pushed through the crowd and grabbed my hands. "Eleanor, my God, why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" "I needed to handle it my way," I said. "And I needed witnesses. Lots of witnesses." James approached with Officer Rodriguez. "Eleanor, we should go to the station now and file the formal complaint while everything is fresh." "Can I do one thing first?" I asked. "Of course." I turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption to this beautiful celebration, but I want you all to understand what just happened here." The crowd quieted, listening. For over a year, I've been fighting to protect myself from my own son. It's been lonely. It's been scary. And there were times I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But tonight, with all of you as witnesses, the truth finally came out. David tried to steal from me. And when I said no, he hit me. I paused, letting that sink in. "Tyler and Sophie, this is still your wedding day. This is still your celebration. Don't let what happened ruin the joy you deserve. I'm going to go with James and the officers now to make my statement. But when I come back, we're cutting that beautiful cake together. Okay?" Tyler hugged me tight. "Grandma, you're the strongest person I know." "I learned from the best," I said. "Your grandfather taught me to stand up for myself, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." I left with James and the officers, my head held high, while the stunned guests slowly started talking again, processing what they'd witnessed. And as we walked to the parking lot, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year: free. At the police station, I sat in a small interview room with Officer Rodriguez, Officer Martinez, and James Chen. The walls were pale green, the fluorescent lights harsh. A recording device sat on the table between us. "Mrs. Thompson, can you tell us in your own words what happened tonight?" Officer Rodriguez asked gently. And I did. I told them everything: the forged signature, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the attempts to have me declared incompetent, the gambling debts, the year-long campaign to steal my home. I spoke for over an hour. James added documents when appropriate. By the time I finished, both officers looked grim. "Mrs. Thompson, what your son did constitutes multiple felonies," Officer Martinez said. "Elder abuse, attempted fraud, forgery, and assault witnessed by over 300 people. The district attorney is going to prosecute this aggressively." "Good," I said simply. They took photographs of my face where David had struck me. The bruise was already forming, purple and angry across my cheek. Evidence. By the time we finished at the station, it was nearly midnight. James drove me back to the wedding venue. Most of the guests had left, but Tyler and Sophie were still there, along with a few close family members. Tyler ran to me the moment I walked in. "Grandma, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired." "We saved you cake," Sophie said, managing a small smile despite her red eyes. And so, at midnight, in an almost empty reception hall, I ate wedding cake with my grandson and his brave new wife. It was the best cake I'd ever tasted. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. David and Melissa were formally charged. David faced 5 felony counts: elder abuse, attempted fraud, forgery, assault, and identity theft. Melissa was charged as an accessory to elder abuse and fraud. Their bail was set at $50,000 each. They couldn't make it. They stayed in jail. The local news picked up the story. Son arrested for attempting to steal elderly mother's home. My face was on the news. David's mugshot was on the news. The story went viral online. I received hundreds of messages from strangers, other elderly people who'd experienced similar abuse, adult children who were horrified, people offering support, sharing their own stories, thanking me for standing up. It was overwhelming and strangely comforting. I wasn't alone. This happened to more people than anyone wanted to admit. 3 weeks after the wedding, there was a preliminary hearing. I had to testify, had to sit in a courtroom and tell a judge exactly what my son had done to me. David and Melissa sat at the defense table in orange jumpsuits. David looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, defeated. Melissa cried through the whole hearing. I didn't cry. I told the truth, clearly, calmly, with James beside me providing documents to support every claim. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Hayes, listened to everything with an increasingly severe expression. When I finished, she looked directly at David. "Mr. Thompson, I've been on the bench for 23 years. I've seen a lot of elder abuse cases. But what you did, the systematic, calculated campaign to defraud your own mother, is among the worst I've encountered. Not only did you attempt to steal her home and have her declared incompetent, but when she resisted, you physically assaulted her in front of 300 witnesses at your own son's wedding. This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on all charges." David's attorney, a tired-looking public defender, tried to argue for reduced bail. Judge Hayes denied it. "Mr. Thompson has proven himself a danger to Mrs. Thompson and a flight risk given the severity of the charges. Bail remains at $50,000. Trial is set for 8 weeks from today." As they led David out of the courtroom, he looked at me. Not with anger, not with defiance, but with something that looked almost like confusion. Like he genuinely couldn't understand how it had come to this. I looked back at him steadily, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a strange emptiness where love used to be. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. James had warned me this would happen. "Mrs. Thompson, how do you feel about your son being in jail?" "Mrs. Thompson, do you regret pressing charges?" "Mrs. Thompson, will you testify at trial?" James started to move me past them, but I stopped. I had something to say. "I want other elderly people to know that you don't have to be a victim. If your adult children are trying to steal from you, manipulate you, or abuse you, you have rights, you have resources. You can fight back. It's not easy. It hurts. But your dignity and your security are worth fighting for." One reporter called out, "Do you have any message for your son?" I paused, thinking. Then, "I have a message for all adult children who see their elderly parents as obstacles or ATM machines. Your parents aren't your inheritance. They're people. They worked their entire lives for what they have. They deserve respect, not robbery. And if you try to steal from them, there are consequences. Legal consequences. The clip went viral. By the next morning, it had been viewed over 2 million times. Tyler called me, his voice shaking. "Grandma, you're all over the internet. People are calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero, Tyler. I'm just a woman who refused to be stolen from." "That makes you a hero to a lot of people." 4 weeks later, 2 days before the trial was set to begin, David's lawyer contacted James with a plea deal. David would plead guilty to elder abuse, attempted fraud, and assault. In exchange, the forgery and identity theft charges would be dropped, and the prosecution would recommend a sentence of 3 years in prison instead of the maximum 10. James called me to discuss it. "Eleanor, the decision is yours, but I'll tell you, 3 years is a real sentence. He'll serve at least 2 with good behavior. He'll have a felony record. He'll never be able to work in certain fields again. It's serious consequences." "What if we go to trial?" "We'll probably win." "The evidence is overwhelming, but trials are unpredictable. A sympathetic jury might reduce the charges, and it will be brutal for you. Cross-examination, having your life picked apart, seeing David try to paint himself as the victim." I thought about it for a long time. Thought about sitting in a courtroom for days or weeks. About facing David's attorney trying to make me look like the villain. About Tyler having to testify against his own father. "I'll accept the plea," I said. 3 years is enough. I don't need revenge. I just need him to stop." The plea hearing was short. David stood before Judge Hayes and admitted what he'd done, out loud, in front of everyone. "I attempted to defraud my mother, Eleanor Thompson, by forging her signature on property transfer documents. I participated in a scheme to have her declared mentally incompetent, despite knowing she was fully capable. I physically assaulted her when she refused to sign over her home. I did these things because I was in debt and saw her assets as my way out. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Judge Hayes accepted the plea and scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. At the sentencing hearing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I'd written it carefully, revised it a dozen times. This was my chance to say what I needed to say. I stood at the podium and looked at David, really looked at him. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Your Honor, 45 years ago, I gave birth to David Thompson. I loved him from the moment I first held him. I raised him to be honest, kind, and hardworking. I sacrificed for him, supported him, believed in him. Somewhere along the way, he forgot those values, or maybe he never truly held them. I don't know. What I do know is that the man who stands before you today is not the son I thought I raised." For over a year, David systematically tried to steal my home and my independence. He forged legal documents with my signature. He spread lies about my mental capacity to family and friends, trying to isolate me and build a case for having me declared incompetent. He researched how to take guardianship of me against my will. He brought a corrupt doctor to my home to give me a fraudulent diagnosis. And when all of that failed, when I refused to give him what he wanted, he hit me. At his own son's wedding, in front of 300 people, including Tyler, my grandson, who has to live with the memory of watching his father assault his grandmother. The physical bruise healed in 2 weeks. The emotional damage will last much longer. David has asked for mercy. He's asked me to consider that he's my son, that he made mistakes, that he deserves another chance. But, Your Honor, David didn't make a mistake. He made choices, deliberate, calculated choices over the course of more than a year. He chose money over integrity. He chose greed over family. He chose to see me as an obstacle instead of a person. I'm 72 years old. My husband and I worked our entire lives to build a secure future. We bought our home in 1985 for $89,000 and spent the next 25 years paying it off. That house represents decades of sacrifice, careful planning, and hard work. It's not just an asset. It's the culmination of our life's work. It's my security, my independence, my dignity. David tried to take that from me. And when I said no, he tried to take my freedom by having me locked away. So no, Your Honor, I don't believe mercy is appropriate here. I believe accountability is what's needed. David needs to face real consequences for what he did. Not just for my sake, but for every elderly person who's being victimized by their own children and is too afraid or too ashamed to speak up. I'm recommending the court accept the plea agreement of 3 years in prison, not because I want revenge, but because David needs to understand that stealing from vulnerable elderly people, even when that person is your own mother, comes with serious consequences. Thank you, Your Honor. I sat down. The courtroom was silent. Tyler was crying quietly in the row behind me. Sophie held his hand. Judge Hayes looked at David. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? David stood slowly. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Your Honor, I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. I was desperate. I made terrible choices. I hurt the person who loved me most in the world. I destroyed my relationship with my son. I threw away everything that mattered, and I did it for money that wasn't even mine. I deserve whatever sentence you give me. I just hope that someday, somehow, my mother and my son can forgive me. He sat down. Judge Hayes looked at her notes for a long moment. Then she spoke. Mr. Thompson, your crimes represent a profound betrayal of trust. You targeted your own mother, a woman who raised you, loved you, and trusted you, and you attempted to rob her of her home, her independence, and her dignity. Elder abuse is a growing epidemic in this country. Adult children who view their aging parents as inconvenient obstacles or early inheritances. What you did is exactly the kind of behavior this court must deter with serious consequences. You are hereby sentenced to 3 years in state prison on the elder abuse charge, 2 years on the fraud charge, and 1 year on the assault charge, to be served concurrently. You will be eligible for parole after serving 2/3 of your sentence. Upon release, you will be on probation for 5 years, during which you are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Eleanor Thompson in any way. You will also be required to complete a gambling addiction treatment program. Additionally, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. You are not to come within 500 feet of Mrs. Thompson, her home, or her place of business. Any violation will result in immediate arrest and additional charges. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, David said quietly. Then this court is adjourned. The bailiff led David away. He looked back once. Our eyes met, and then he was gone. I walked out of that courtroom with James, Tyler, and Sophie beside me. Reporters shouted questions, but I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Outside in the bright afternoon sun, I stopped and took a deep breath. It's over, James said. Yes, I agreed. It's finally over. Tyler hugged me tight. Grandma, I'm so proud of you. You were so strong in there. I had to be, sweetheart. For me, for you, and for every other elderly person going through this nightmare. Sophie wiped her eyes. What you said in there, about dignity and independence, it was perfect. It was the truth, I said simply. And the truth matters. We went to dinner that night, just the 4 of us, James, Tyler, Sophie, and me. We didn't talk about the trial. We didn't talk about David. We talked about the future. About Tyler and Sophie's plans, about their new apartment, about life, and for the first time in over a year, I felt like I could breathe freely, like I could look forward instead of constantly looking over my shoulder. David was going to prison. Melissa had taken a plea deal for probation and community service in exchange for testifying against David. My house was secure. My assets were protected. My independence was intact. I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like coming through a storm battered, but still standing. That night, lying in bed in my own house, my secure, safe, legally protected house, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the fear, the investigation, the confrontation, the trial. And I thought about Richard, about how he'd always told me I was stronger than I knew, about how he'd made sure I'd be protected after he was gone. I did it, Richard, I whispered into the darkness. I protected what we built. I stood up for myself, just like you taught me. And then finally I cried, not from sadness, but from release, from relief, from the overwhelming emotion of having survived something I'd never imagined I'd have to face. My own son had tried to destroy me, and I'd destroyed his plans instead. 6 months after David's sentencing, I sold the big house. Not because I had to, not because anyone pressured me, but because I wanted to. That house had too many ghosts, too many memories tainted by what David had tried to do. Every room reminded me of his betrayal, the office where I'd caught him going through my files, the kitchen where he'd tried to manipulate me into signing away my rights, the living room where Melissa had cried fake tears. I couldn't heal there. So I bought a smaller place, a 2-bedroom condo by the beach, about 20 miles from where Tyler and Sophie lived. It had big windows that let in the morning sun, a small balcony where I could drink my coffee and watch the waves, and absolutely no bad memories. The day I moved in, Tyler and Sophie helped me unpack boxes. We ordered pizza, we laughed, we talked about the future instead of dwelling on the past. "Grandma, this place is perfect for you," Sophie said, standing on the balcony looking out at the ocean. "It feels like a fresh start." "That's exactly what it is," I agreed. "A fresh start." Tyler had been quiet most of the day. Finally, as we were finishing the pizza, he said, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." Do you ever miss him? Dad, I mean?" I thought about it carefully, honestly. I miss the son I thought I had, the little boy I raised, the man I hoped he'd become. But David? The real David who tried to steal from me and hit me? No, I don't miss him. Tyler nodded, his eyes wet. I don't either, and I feel guilty about that. "Don't," I said firmly, taking his hand. "You're allowed to protect yourself from people who hurt you, even when those people are family, especially when those people are family." He calls me sometimes, from prison. I don't answer. That's your choice to make. No one can tell you how to handle this. Do you think he's really sorry? Or just sorry he got caught? I smiled sadly. I think David is sorry his plan didn't work. I think he's sorry he's in prison. Whether he's truly sorry for what he did to me, I honestly don't know. And I've made peace with the fact that I may never know. Sophie joined us at the table, putting her arm around Tyler. "Mrs. Thompson, you saved Tyler, you know. If you hadn't exposed David when you did, Tyler might have spent his whole life thinking his parents were good people who were just concerned about you. He might have ended up just like them." "You're nothing like them," I said to Tyler. "You're honest. You're kind. You work hard for what you have. You're the man your grandfather would be proud of." "I hope so," Tyler said quietly. 3 months after I moved into the condo, I got a call from a local senior center. They'd seen the news coverage of my case and wanted to know if I'd be willing to speak at a workshop they were hosting about elder financial abuse. I said yes. Standing in front of 60 elderly people and their adult children telling my story, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person in that room who was vulnerable. Every person who'd ever been manipulated by their own family. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle, I told them. It was accepting that my own son could do this to me. That the child I'd raised and loved could see me as nothing more than an ATM machine. An elderly woman in the front row raised her hand. "How did you find the courage to fight back?" "I realized something important," I said. "My dignity was worth more than keeping the peace. My security was worth more than pretending everything was fine. And my independence was worth fighting for, even if it meant losing my son. After the workshop, dozens of people came up to me. Some thanked me. Some shared their own stories of abuse. Some asked for advice. One woman, probably in her mid-70s, grabbed my hand with tears in her eyes. My daughter has been pressuring me to sign over my house. She says she's just trying to help, but something feels wrong. After hearing your story, I'm going to get a lawyer. I'm going to protect myself. Good, I said, squeezing her hand. You deserve to be protected. Your home is yours. Don't let anyone take that from you. That night, driving home along the coast road with the windows down and the ocean air in my lungs, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Peace. Real, genuine peace. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Grandma, Sophie and I have news. Can we come over for dinner tomorrow? I smiled and texted back. Of course, I'll make lasagna. The next evening, Tyler and Sophie sat on my couch holding hands, both of them grinning like they had the world's best secret. We're pregnant, Sophie announced. You're going to be a great-grandmother. I cried. Happy tears this time, tears of joy and hope and the promise of new beginnings. Does your father know? I asked Tyler. His smile faded slightly. Not yet. I don't know if I'll tell him. Is that terrible? It's your decision, I said. Your baby, your family, your choice. He made his choices, Tyler said quietly. Now I get to make mine. We spent the evening talking about baby names and nursery colors and all the normal, beautiful things that families talk about when they're not busy betraying each other. After they left, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere, David was in a prison cell. Melissa was living in a small apartment, working as a cashier to pay her probation fees and community service requirements. And I was here, free, safe, secure, watching the sunset from my own home that no one could take from me. I thought about Richard, about how he'd always said I was stronger than I knew, about how he'd made sure I'd have the resources to protect myself. I did it, my love, I whispered. I protected what we built, and I learned something important. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, love, trust, and when those things are gone, blood doesn't mean anything. 9 months later, I held my great-grandson for the first time. Tyler and Sophie named him Richard after my husband, after a man who'd valued integrity and hard work and protecting the people you love. Little Richard looked up at me with wide blue eyes, and I felt my heart fill with hope. This child would grow up knowing the truth, knowing that his great-grandmother had fought for her dignity and won, knowing that you don't have to be a victim, knowing that even when people you love betray you, you can survive, you can heal, you can build something new. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family loyalty? It's the hardest choice you'll ever make, but sometimes it's the only choice that leads to survival. I'm 73 now. I live in my beautiful condo by the beach. I volunteer at the senior center twice a week, teaching workshops about recognizing and preventing elder abuse. I spend time with Tyler, Sophie, and little Richard. I have coffee with friends. I take walks on the beach. I live my life on my own terms. David will be eligible for parole in another year. I don't know if he'll reach out when he's released. I don't know if I'll respond if he does. What I do know is that I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes. I proved that. I stood up to someone who tried to destroy me, and I won. Not because I'm special, not because I'm particularly brave, but because I decided that my dignity mattered, that my security mattered, that I mattered. If you're watching this and you're going through something similar, if your adult children are pressuring you, manipulating you, trying to take what's yours, please know this. You don't have to be a victim. You have rights, you have resources, you can fight back. It won't be easy. It will hurt. You might lose relationships that you thought mattered. But what you'll gain is something more valuable: your independence, your dignity, and your peace of mind. Document everything. Get a lawyer. Trust your instincts. And remember that saying no to people who are trying to hurt you isn't selfish. It's survival. I'm Eleanor Thompson. I'm 73 years old. My son tried to steal my house and have me declared incompetent, and I stopped him. If I can do it, you can too. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Share your own experiences. Let other people know they're not alone. And if you know an elderly person who might be experiencing this kind of abuse, reach out to them. Check on them. Be the voice that tells them they deserve better. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, you're stronger than you think, even when the people who should love you most try to tell you otherwise. You are strong. You are worthy, and you deserve to live your life with dignity and peace. Never forget that.